The morning mist clung to the rocky canyon walls as 12-year-old Maya Chen followed the hiking trail behind her family's cabin. Her parents had warned her about wandering too far, but the strange humming sound echoing from the valley below had been calling to her for 3 days now. It wasn't like anything she'd heard before, not quite mechanical, not quite natural, but somehow both at once. As she rounded a bend in the path, Maya's breath caught in her throat. A massive metallic structure sat wedged between two cliff faces, its surface gleaming with an otherworldly blue-silver sheen. The ship, for that's what it had to be, was easily the size of her school gymnasium, its hull cracked and smoking from what must have been a catastrophic landing. But it wasn't the alien vessel that made Maya's heart race. It was the sound coming from within, a desperate, mournful howling that spoke of pain and terror in a language that needed no translation. Maya crept closer, her hiking boots crunching softly on the loose gravel. Through a jagged tear in the ship's hull, she could see movement. Her eyes widened as she spotted them. Creatures that looked vaguely wolf-like but walked upright on two legs, their fur a deep silver blue that seemed to shimmer in the dim light filtering through the canyon. One of the beings was trapped beneath a massive piece of twisted metal, her leg clearly broken and bleeding a strange, luminescent fluid. But what broke Maya's heart was the small figure beside her. A pup, no bigger than a human toddler, whimpering and trying desperately to dig at the debris pinning its mother. The adult alien's large, intelligent eyes met Maya's through the gap in the hull. There was no aggression there, only desperate pleading. The creature's mouth opened and a series of complex sounds emerged. Clicks, whistles, and something that sounded almost like words. Though Maya couldn't understand the language, the meaning was crystal clear. Help my child. Maya looked around frantically. The other adult aliens she could see were either unconscious or worse, their bodies still and lifeless among the wreckage. Whatever had brought this ship down had been violent and sudden. The humming sound she'd been hearing was growing weaker by the hour, some kind of life support system that was failing. The trapped mother tried again to push at the debris, but her efforts only caused more pieces to shift dangerously. The pup let out a frightened yelp as sparks showered down from damaged systems above. Time was running out. Maya pulled out her phone, but as expected, there was no signal in the canyon. Even if there had been, what would she tell the authorities? That she'd found a crashed alien spaceship? They'd think she was making up stories, and by the time anyone believed her, it might be too late. She looked back at the desperate mother, at the terrified pup, and made a decision that would change everything. Maya began looking for a way inside the ship. The hull breach was too high and too jagged for safe entry, but as she circled the vessel, she found what looked like an emergency exit near the rear. The door was partially open, its mechanism clearly damaged in the crash. Maya squeezed through the gap, her small size finally being an advantage. Inside the ship was a maze of corridors filled with strange, beautiful technology, walls that seemed to pulse with soft light, control surfaces that responded to touch with musical tones, and air that tasted faintly of something like cinnamon and ozone. But Maya didn't have time to marvel at the wonders around her. Following the sound of the mother's call, she made her way through the wreckage-strewn passages. When she finally reached the main area where the family was trapped, Maya gasped. The piece of metal pinning the mother was enormous, easily weighing several hundred pounds. There was no way Maya could lift it alone, but as she studied the scene, her mind began working the way it always did when faced with a problem. Maya had always been good at puzzles, at finding solutions others missed. Her father called it her engineer's brain, inherited from her grandmother who had designed bridges. The debris wasn't just lying on the alien's leg, it was being held in place by the ship's twisted framework. If she could find the right support beam to move, create the right leverage, maybe she could shift enough weight to free the mother without causing more damage. Maya began examining the wreckage carefully, testing different pieces, looking for the key that would unlock this deadly puzzle. The pup watched her with wide, hopeful eyes that reminded her so much of her own dog back home that her throat tightened with emotion. The mother alien spoke again, her voice weaker now. But this time, there was something different in her tone. Not just desperation, but a growing recognition. She was beginning to understand that this strange, small creature had come not to harm, but to help. Maya found what she was looking for, a support strut that had bent but not broken in the crash. If she could straighten it just enough, it might take the pressure off the main debris. She braced her feet against a stable piece of the hull and began to push with all her strength. Nothing happened at first. Maya gritted her teeth and tried again, remembering her father's lessons about using leverage instead of just force. She repositioned herself, found a better angle, and pushed once more. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the strut began to straighten. The massive piece of debris shifted slightly, and the mother alien's eyes went wide with hope. But Maya could tell she wasn't strong enough to finish the job alone. She needed help, and the only one available was the frightened pup. Maya looked at the young alien and held out her hand, speaking in the softest, most reassuring voice she could manage. She didn't know if the pup would understand, but she had to try. Some things, Maya was beginning to realize, were universal. The pup stared at Maya's outstretched hand with large golden eyes that seemed to glow in the dim emergency lighting of the wrecked ship. Maya kept her voice soft and steady, the same tone she used with frightened animals back home. The young alien was clearly terrified, caught between trust and the instinct to flee. Maya slowly moved closer, making herself as small and non-threatening as possible. She pointed to the bent support strut, then to herself, then to the pup. Even without shared language, her meaning was clear. They needed to work together. The mother alien, despite her pain, began making gentle sounds to her offspring. Her voice carried the unmistakable tone of a parent encouraging a frightened child to be brave. The pup's ears, which had been flattened against its head in fear, slowly began to prick up. Finally, the young alien took a tentative step toward Maya. Up close, she could see that its fur wasn't just silver blue, but seemed to contain flecks of light that shifted and moved like tiny stars. The pup was beautiful in a way that was completely alien yet somehow familiar. Maya gestured again to the strut, then placed her hands on it and pretended to push. The pup watched intently, its head tilting in a gesture so dog-like that Maya almost smiled despite the gravity of the situation. Then, to her amazement, the young alien moved to the opposite end of the strut and placed its small hands where Maya had indicated. Working together, they began to push. The pup was stronger than Maya had expected, its alien physiology apparently more robust than it appeared. Slowly, the support beam began to straighten further. The massive debris pinning the mother shifted again, this time lifting enough that she could pull her injured leg free. But their victory was short-lived. As the weight redistributed, other parts of the damaged ship began to groan ominously. A shower of sparks erupted from an overhead conduit, and somewhere in the distance, Maya could hear the sound of metal tearing. The mother alien immediately began trying to stand, but her injured leg wouldn't support her weight. She fell back with a cry of pain, her luminescent blood leaving bright traces on the ship's floor. The pup rushed to her side, whimpering in distress. Maya looked around desperately. The ship was clearly becoming more unstable by the minute. They needed to get out, but there was no way the injured mother could make it through the corridors and out the emergency exit Maya had used. They needed another solution. As if responding to her thoughts, the mother alien began speaking urgently, pointing toward a section of the wall that looked different from the rest. Maya moved closer and realized it wasn't a wall at all, but some kind of escape pod or shuttle bay. The surface was covered with symbols that pulsed with soft blue light. The alien mother continued speaking, her tone becoming more insistent. She was clearly trying to tell Maya something important. The pup looked back and forth between them, then suddenly moved to the wall panel and pressed its small hand against one of the glowing symbols. A section of the wall slid away with a soft whisper, revealing a smaller chamber beyond. Inside was what could only be described as a lifeboat, a sleek pod-like vehicle that could probably hold 3 or 4 beings. But as Maya looked closer, she saw flashing red lights on its control panel, and she didn't need to understand alien technology to know what red lights meant in any culture. The escape pod was damaged too. The mother alien saw Maya's expression and seemed to understand. She spoke again, but this time her voice was different, sadder, more resigned. She was giving up, accepting that she wouldn't make it out. But her eyes kept moving to her offspring, and her meaning became heartbreakingly clear. She wanted Maya to take the pup and leave her behind. Maya shook her head firmly. She had not come this far to abandon anyone. There had to be another way. She moved to the escape pod and began examining it more closely, her engineer's mind working furiously to understand the alien technology. The damage seemed to be to some kind of power coupling. Energy wasn't flowing properly from the main system to the pod's engines. But Maya could see where the connections should go, could trace the logical flow of the system even though it was like nothing she'd ever seen before. She looked back at the mother alien and pointed to herself, then to the pod, then made a gesture she hoped conveyed working or fixing. The alien's eyes widened with something that might have been hope. Maya began tracing the power pathways with her finger, following them from the main ship's systems to the pod. The pup watched intently, and after a moment began pointing to other connections Maya hadn't noticed. The young alien might not understand human technology, but it clearly had some knowledge of its own people's systems. Working together, they identified the problem. A crucial relay had been damaged in the crash, breaking the power flow. Maya could see where it was supposed to connect, but the component itself was shattered beyond repair. Then Maya had an idea. She pulled her phone from her pocket and looked at it thoughtfully. The battery was still mostly charged, and while the voltage and connections were completely different, the principle was the same: storing and releasing electrical energy. She had no idea if it would work, but it was the only option they had. Maya began carefully dismantling part of her phone's case, exposing the battery and its connections. The alien mother watched with growing interest, seeming to understand what Maya was attempting. She began making encouraging sounds, speaking in a tone that needed no translation. The pup moved closer, its fear forgotten in fascination as Maya worked. When she looked up for a moment, she found the young alien studying her face with an intensity that was almost unnerving. There was an intelligence in those golden eyes that was far beyond what Maya would have expected from someone so young. As Maya worked to jury-rig a connection between her phone's battery and the alien power system, she began to realize something that would have seemed impossible just hours before. Despite their completely different origins, despite the vast gulf between their technologies and cultures, she and these alien beings were finding ways to understand each other. They were working together, problem-solving together, trusting each other. Maybe, Maya thought as she made the final connections, being human wasn't just about being from Earth. Maybe it was about something deeper, the willingness to help others, to take risks for strangers, to refuse to give up when things seemed impossible. She finished her makeshift repair and looked at the pod's control panel. The red lights were still flashing, but some of the other indicators had changed color. It might work. It had to work. The mother alien reached out with one clawed hand and gently touched Maya's shoulder. When the girl looked up, she saw tears in the alien's eyes, proof that some things truly were universal. The escape pod hummed to life with Maya's makeshift power connection, its interior lighting shifting from the ominous red warnings to a softer blue-green that seemed more hopeful. But as the systems activated, new problems became apparent. The pod's controls were completely alien to Maya, covered in symbols that meant nothing to her. And even worse, she could hear the main ship groaning around them as its structural integrity continued to fail. The mother alien tried to pull herself upright again, determination overriding her obvious pain. She managed to drag herself to the pod's entrance and began pointing at different controls. While speaking urgently to her pup, Maya realized she was trying to teach the young one how to operate the escape system in the few minutes they had left. But the pup was clearly too young to understand the complex instructions. Its small hands moved hesitantly over the controls, pressing buttons randomly that caused various warning sounds and flashing lights. The young alien looked back at its mother with growing panic, chittering in distress. Maya stepped forward and gently placed her hands over the pup's, stilling its frantic movements. She looked into the mother alien's eyes and pointed to herself, then to the controls. If the mother couldn't operate the pod and the pup was too young, then Maya would have to learn. The alien mother's expression went through a range of emotions: surprise, doubt, and finally, a desperate hope. She began speaking more slowly, pointing to each control surface and making specific gestures. Maya watched intently, trying to memorize the sequence even though she didn't understand the underlying principles. A loud crash echoed through the ship as another section gave way. The deck beneath their feet tilted slightly and the lights flickered. They were running out of time. The mother alien made a decision. She pulled a small device from her belt, something that looked like a crystal pendant that pulsed with internal light. She pressed it into Maya's hand, then guided Maya's fingers to show her how to hold it. When Maya gripped it properly, the crystal grew warm and suddenly Maya could understand fragments of what the alien was saying. It wasn't perfect. Translation more like getting the emotional meaning behind words rather than the words themselves. But it was enough. The mother was telling her about her people, about their world among the stars, about how they had been exploring when their ship had been damaged by some kind of space storm. She spoke of her gratitude to Maya, of her amazement that a young being from this planet had shown such courage and kindness. Most importantly, she was giving Maya instructions for the escape pod, not just how to operate it, but where to go. There was a place, she explained through the crystal's translation, where her people had built a hidden outpost in this star system. The pod would take them there automatically if Maya could just get it launched. Another section of the ship collapsed somewhere behind them, and the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. The pup lost its footing and tumbled into Maya, who caught the frightened alien and held it steady. The young creature looked up at her with complete trust, and Maya felt the full weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Maya helped the mother alien into the pod first, though every movement clearly caused her agony. The injured leg was worse than Maya had initially thought. The luminescent blood was flowing more freely now, and the alien's breathing had become labored. But she refused to give up, pulling herself into the pilot's seat with fierce determination. The pup hesitated at the pod's entrance, looking back and forth between Maya and its mother. Maya realized the young alien was confused about whether she was coming with them or staying behind. The thought hadn't occurred to Maya until that moment, but now she wondered, was there even room for all three of them in the small escape vessel? As if reading her thoughts, the mother alien spoke again, her words carrying clearly through the translation crystal. She was insisting that Maya come with them. Her people would want to meet the young human who had risked everything to help strangers. Besides, she pointed out with what might have been alien humor, someone needed to make sure Maya's jury-rigged power connection didn't fail during the journey. Maya looked back through the pod's entrance at the dying ship. Her parents would be worried sick when she didn't return to the cabin. They would search for her, probably for days or weeks. But if she stayed behind and tried to make it back through the increasingly unstable wreckage, she might not survive to tell anyone what had happened here. The decision was made for her when another violent shudder ran through the ship. The corridor they had come through was now completely blocked by fallen debris. The only way out was through the escape pod. Maya climbed in beside the pup, who immediately pressed against her side as if seeking comfort. The contact was surprisingly warm, and Maya could feel a faint vibration through the alien's body, perhaps their equivalent of a purr. Despite everything, she found the sensation oddly comforting. The mother alien's hands moved across the control surfaces with practiced ease despite her injuries. The pod began to hum more loudly, and Maya felt a strange sensation in her stomach as artificial gravity systems activated. Through the small viewport, she could see the rocky canyon walls beginning to move as the pod extracted itself from the wrecked ship. But just as they cleared the wreckage, alarms began sounding throughout the pod. Maya didn't need the translation crystal to understand that something was wrong. The escape vessel was shaking violently, and several of the control surfaces were flashing urgent warnings. The mother alien worked frantically at the controls, but Maya could see she was weakening rapidly from blood loss. Her movements were becoming slower and less precise. The pup whimpered in fear as the pod's motion became more erratic. Maya looked at the crystal device in her hand, then at the failing control systems. She had jury-rigged one alien system already. Maybe she could help stabilize whatever was going wrong with the pod systems too. But as she moved toward the controls, the mother alien grabbed her wrist gently but firmly. Through the crystal, Maya understood her message clearly. The pod's navigation system was locked onto the hidden outpost, but someone needed to manually control the landing when they arrived. The mother was too weak to do it safely, and the pup was too young. It would have to be Maya. The human girl looked at the alien control systems, more complex than anything she'd ever imagined, knowing that 3 lives now depended on her ability to learn something completely beyond her experience. But as the pod shook around them and the pup pressed closer to her side, Maya felt something she'd never experienced before, not just the desire to help, but the absolute certainty that she could. She might be just a 12-year-old human girl, but she had already proven that some problems could be solved with determination, creativity, and the willingness to risk everything for others. As the pod burst free of the planet's atmosphere and into the star-filled darkness of space, Maya began studying the alien controls with the same focused intensity she'd once reserved for math puzzles. She was going to get them home safely. Somehow, some way, she was going to save them all. Space was nothing like Maya had imagined. Through the pod's viewport, stars didn't twinkle but burned with steady, brilliant light against a darkness so complete it seemed to have weight. The Earth fell away below them, a blue-white marble that looked impossibly fragile suspended in the infinite black. The mother alien, whose name the translation Crystal helped Maya understand as something like singing wind through tall grass, or simply Jara, had managed to stabilize their flight path before losing consciousness. She lay slumped in the pilot seat, her breathing shallow but steady while her injured leg had been wrapped with material from the pod's emergency medical kit. The pup, who was called something that translated roughly to Little Star or Kess, had curled up next to Maya on the small passenger bench. The young alien's earlier terror had gradually given way to curiosity as they traveled through space, and now Kess pressed against the viewport with obvious wonder, chattering softly in a way that reminded Maya of a child seeing snow for the first time. Maya found herself studying the alien technology around them with growing amazement. The controls weren't just functional, they were beautiful. Surfaces that looked like living crystal responded to touch with musical tones, and the readouts displayed information in flowing patterns that seemed more like art than data. Even in the escape pod, the aliens' advanced understanding of both form and function was evident. But as the hours passed, Maya began to notice troubling signs. Her makeshift power connection was holding, but barely. The phone battery was draining, faster than she'd hoped, and several of the pod's systems were operating at reduced capacity. Worse, the crystal translator was becoming unreliable, its warmth fading as whatever powered it weakened. Kess seemed to sense Maya's growing concern. The pup moved away from the viewport and came to sit beside her, placing one small, clawed hand on Maya's arm. Even without the translator, the gesture was unmistakably comforting. Maya smiled at the young alien and tried to project confidence she didn't feel. She had no idea how far they were from their destination, or what she would find when they arrived at the hidden outpost. Would Jara's people trust a human? Would they even believe that Maya had helped rather than harmed their family? As if responding to her thoughts, the pod's systems began chiming softly. New symbols appeared on the main display, and Maya felt a change in their motion. They were approaching something. Through the viewport, Maya could see what looked like a large asteroid, its surface pockmarked with craters and seemingly lifeless. But as they drew closer, she began to make out details that suggested otherwise. Gentle curves that looked too regular to be natural, patches of surface that seemed to emit their own faint light. And was that an opening in the rock face ahead? Kess became excited, pressing against the viewport and making sounds that were clearly expressions of recognition and joy. This was home, or at least a piece of home among the stars. The pod automatically adjusted its course toward the asteroid, and Maya realized that the approach was being guided by some external system. Someone or something was bringing them in. The question was whether it was friend or foe. As they passed through what Maya now realized was a camouflaged entrance, she gasped in wonder. The interior of the asteroid had been completely hollowed out and transformed into a massive space station. Gardens of alien plants created spirals of impossible colors throughout multiple levels, while beings like Jara moved along walkways that seemed to defy gravity. Architecture that looked grown rather than built, curved in organic patterns that hurt Maya's eyes to follow. But what struck her most was the sense of peace that seemed to emanate from everything she saw. There was no harsh lighting, no hard edges, no sense of military purpose. This was a place designed for living, for growing, for raising families among the stars. The pod settled onto a landing platform with barely a bump, its automatic systems completing their journey with elegant precision. But as the engines powered down, Maya realized her real test was just beginning. Through the transparent aluminum of the platform's dome, she could see figures approaching, tall beings like Jara but clearly older, their silver-blue fur marked with patterns that suggested rank or status. They moved with purpose but not aggression, and Maya could see them speaking among themselves as they studied the damaged escape pod. Kes was practically vibrating with excitement, making sounds that were clearly calls for help and explanations. But when the platform's atmospheric systems activated, and the first of the aliens opened the pod's hatch, the young alien immediately moved to stand protectively beside Maya. The lead alien stepped into the pod and took in the scene with large, intelligent eyes. Jara, still unconscious and clearly injured. Kes, standing bravely but obviously frightened. And Maya, a small human child surrounded by technology she shouldn't understand, holding a translation crystal that marked her as someone who had been accepted by their family. The alien spoke, and even without the failing translator, Maya could hear the authority in its voice. This was someone used to making important decisions. But there was also concern, for Jara, for Kes, and surprisingly for Maya herself. Maya stood slowly, trying to appear non-threatening while also projecting the confidence she'd learned was crucial when dealing with frightened animals. She pointed to Jara and spoke clearly, hoping her tone would convey meaning even if her words didn't. "She's hurt. I tried to help. We all tried to help each other." The alien leader tilted its head in a gesture Maya was beginning to recognize as thoughtful consideration. It moved closer to Jara, examining her injuries with what was clearly medical knowledge, then spoke to the others who had entered the pod. Immediately, several aliens began carefully moving Jara onto what looked like a floating stretcher. Their movements were gentle but efficient, and Maya could see healing devices being activated even as they transported the injured mother toward the station's medical facilities. But when Maya started to follow, the leader held up one clawed hand in an unmistakable gesture. "Stop." Maya's heart sank. She had been afraid of this moment, when the aliens would decide that a human didn't belong among them, when they would see her as a threat rather than a helper. Kes made a sound of distress and moved even closer to Maya's side. But then the alien leader did something unexpected. It knelt down so that its eyes were level with Maya's, and when it spoke, its voice was gentle despite the alien syllables. It reached out slowly, carefully, and touched the translation crystal in Maya's hand. Suddenly, Maya could understand again. The crystal's power somehow recharged by the alien's touch, and what she heard made her eyes fill with tears of relief. "Young one of the distant world," the alien was saying, "Jara's family song tells us of your courage. You risked much for strangers, asking nothing in return. This is the way of the people we call Kethmar, the bridge builders. We would be honored to learn more of your kind." The alien gestured toward the station beyond the platform, and Maya realized she was being invited not just to visit, but to stay as long as she wished. She was welcome here. Kes chirped happily and tugged at Maya's hand, clearly eager to show her the wonders of the outpost. But Maya hesitated, looking back toward the viewport where Earth was still visible as a tiny blue dot. Her parents would be looking for her. Her world would want to know about this place, these people. And Maya was beginning to realize that her adventure was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The alien outpost was a marvel that challenged everything Maya thought she knew about architecture and design. As the leader, who introduced himself as Elder Thalon, guided her through the corridors, Maya found herself constantly looking up, down, and around corners to take in spaces that seemed to bend in impossible ways. Kes bounded ahead of them, clearly delighted to be showing off their home to the strange new friend. The pup chattered constantly, pointing out features that Maya couldn't begin to understand but found beautiful nonetheless. Gardens that grew in spiral patterns along the walls, their plants glowing softly with bioluminescence, water features that flowed upward as easily as down, creating musical sounds as they moved, living spaces carved directly into the asteroid's rock but somehow made warm and inviting. "Your species," Elder Thalon said as they walked, the translation crystal making his words clear, "is younger than ours by many thousands of cycles. Yet you show understanding that some of our people take lifetimes to achieve." Maya wasn't sure how to respond to that. She had just done what felt right, helping someone in trouble. It didn't seem like anything special to her. They passed other aliens going about their daily activities. Some tended the strange gardens. Others worked with crystalline devices that looked like they could be computers or art projects or both. Children played games that involved floating geometric shapes and laughter that sounded surprisingly similar to human children despite the alien voices. What struck Maya most was how peaceful everything felt. There were no weapons that she could see, no guards, no sense of threat or danger. These people had found a way to live that was completely foreign to anything on Earth, yet somehow felt absolutely right. They arrived at a circular chamber that was clearly some kind of medical facility. Through transparent walls, Maya could see Jara lying on what looked like a bed made of living crystal. Healing devices surrounded her, emitting soft lights and musical tones. Her injured leg was encased in something that looked like flowing liquid metal. "She will recover fully," Elder Thalen assured Maya. "Our medical arts are advanced, but recovery will take time, and she has been asking for you and her child constantly." Maya could see Jara's eyes tracking toward them through the transparent wall, and the alien mother's face brightened when she spotted Maya and Kes. She tried to speak, but Elder Thalon gestured for her to rest. "She wants to tell our council of your actions," he explained to Maya. "Among our people, what you did, risking yourself for strangers, finding solutions where others saw only problems, refusing to abandon those in need. These are the highest virtues. We have legends of such beings, but to meet one so young—" Kes tugged at Maya's sleeve and pointed toward another section of the facility. Through the walls, Maya could see what looked like a massive chamber filled with floating displays showing star maps, planetary systems, and streams of data she couldn't interpret. "That is our communications center," Elder Thalon explained. "From here we can speak with our homeworlds, coordinate with other outposts, monitor space traffic throughout this region." He paused, studying Maya carefully. "It is also from here that we could, if you wished, send a message to your world, to let your people know you are safe." Maya felt a surge of relief followed immediately by worry. Her parents would be frantic by now. Search teams would be combing the mountains looking for her. But how could she possibly explain where she was or what had happened? "Would they believe me?" she asked. Elder Thalen's expression, which Maya was learning to read despite its alien features, showed something that might have been amusement. "That is an interesting question, young bridge builder. Tell me, do your people often encounter others from beyond their world?" Maya shook her head. As far as she knew, humans had never made contact with aliens. There were stories, of course, but nothing official, nothing real. "Then perhaps," Elder Thalen said thoughtfully, "it is time that changed." They continued through the outpost, and Maya began to understand the scope of what she was seeing. This wasn't just a research station or military outpost. It was a community. Families lived here. Children were born and raised here. Art was created and knowledge was shared. The aliens, who called themselves the Kethmari, had built something that was part home, part school, part laboratory, and part sanctuary. "We are explorers," Elder Thalon explained as they stopped in a vast chamber where alien children played, while adults worked on projects that seemed to combine science and art. "But not conquerors. We seek to understand, to learn, to make connections between the scattered islands of intelligence throughout the galaxy." "Bridge builders," Maya said. "Understanding? Yes. And in you we see the same potential. Your species is young, true, but you show remarkable adaptability. In a single day you learn to work with our technology, to communicate across the barriers of language and culture, to solve problems that had no precedent in your experience." Maya watched the alien children at play and noticed something that made her smile. Despite their non-human appearance, their games weren't so different from ones she had played. Tag seemed to be universal, as did some form of hide-and-seek. When one of the younger aliens fell and scraped their knee, the reaction was exactly the same as any human child: tears, calls for comfort, and gentle attention from nearby adults. "We would like to offer you a choice," Elder Thalon said suddenly. "You could stay here with us for a time, learn our ways, our technologies, our understanding of the galaxy. When you were ready, you could return to your world as our first ambassador. Or, Maya prompted, "or we could return you now, with devices that would allow your people to contact us when they are ready. The choice is entirely yours, young bridge builder." Maya looked around the incredible space station, at the wonders she had barely begun to explore. The scientist in her wanted to stay, to learn everything she could about these amazing people and their technology. But the 12-year-old girl who missed her parents wanted to go home. Kess approached her shyly, carrying something in their small hands. It was a device Maya hadn't seen before, a crystalline structure that seemed to contain moving lights, like a miniature galaxy trapped in amber. "For you," Kess said through the translator. The young alien's first words Maya had understood clearly, "So you not forget us." Maya knelt down to accept the gift, and Kess surprised her by wrapping their arms around her in an unmistakably human-like hug. Despite all the differences between their species, some gestures of affection seemed to transcend biology. "I won't forget," Maya promised. "Ever." Elder Thalen watched this exchange with obvious satisfaction. "The young often see more clearly than their elders," he observed. "Perhaps the future of both our peoples rests in such connections." As Maya held the crystalline gift and felt Kess's warm embrace, she began to realize that her choice wasn't really about staying or going. It was about what kind of future she wanted to help build. The aliens had called her a bridge builder, and maybe that's exactly what she was meant to be. But first, she had to get home. She had to convince her own people that the universe was far more wonderful and full of potential friends than they had ever imagined. And somehow she had to do it in a way that wouldn't cause fear or panic. Looking at Elder Thalen, Maya took a deep breath and made her decision. "I want to go home," she said, "but I want to come back too. And I want my people to know about yours when they're ready." The alien elder's expression showed what Maya was certain was approval. "Spoken like a true bridge builder," he said. "Very well. Let us prepare for your return. But first there are things you must learn, gifts you must carry, and promises you must make." Maya nodded seriously, understanding that her real education was about to begin. 3 days later, Maya stood in the same rocky canyon where her adventure had begun, but everything had changed. Hidden beneath her jacket was a communication device that looked like an ordinary pendant, but could reach across the stars. In her pocket was the crystalline gift from Kess, which would serve as proof of her incredible journey. And in her mind were memories and knowledge that would shape the rest of her life. The Kethmari had been true to their word. Elder Thalen had spent hours teaching her about galactic civilization, about the careful protocols for first contact, about the importance of allowing civilizations to develop at their own pace. Maya now understood that Earth wasn't ready for open contact, not yet. But that didn't mean the groundwork couldn't be laid. Jara had recovered enough to see Maya off personally. The alien mother had pressed a small device into Maya's hands, a medical scanner that could detect and treat injuries or illnesses that human doctors wouldn't encounter for centuries. "For the times when help is needed and none can be found," Jara had said through the translator. But the hardest goodbye had been with Kess. The young alien had begged to come with Maya, to see Earth and meet other humans. Elder Thalen had gently but firmly explained why that wasn't possible yet, but he had also made a promise that had made Kess's eyes light up with joy. "When the time comes for our peoples to meet openly," he had said, "you will be among the first ambassadors to visit their world." Now Maya stood alone in the canyon, looking up at the sky where she knew her new friends were hidden among the stars. The crashed ship was gone. The Kethmari had retrieved it during the night, leaving no trace of its presence except for some scorch marks on the rocks that could easily be explained as lightning damage. Maya began the hike back to her family's cabin, already working on the story she would tell. She had fallen and hit her head while hiking. She had been unconscious for several hours, maybe even overnight, confused and disoriented. It would explain her absence and any odd behavior her parents might notice. But as she walked, Maya was already planning for the future. She would study harder in school, particularly in sciences and languages. She would learn everything she could about space, about technology, about diplomacy and communication. And someday, when humanity was ready, she would help them take their first steps into a larger universe. The sound of voices calling her name echoed off the canyon walls. Search and rescue teams had been looking for her, just as she had expected. Maya began running toward the voices, calling back to let them know she was safe. Her parents reached her first, wrapping her in fierce hugs and checking her for injuries with the desperate intensity of people who had feared the worst. Maya submitted to their concern, answering their questions about where she had been and what had happened, sticking to her prepared story while her heart ached with the weight of the secret she now carried. "We were so scared," her mother whispered, stroking Maya's hair. When you didn't come back last night, we thought something terrible had happened to you. I'm okay, Maya assured her, and it was true. She was more than okay. She was changed, expanded, filled with purpose she had never felt before. I just got lost and confused, but I'm fine now. That night, as her family slept peacefully in the cabin, Maya slipped outside and activated the communication device the Kethmari had given her. Elder Thalon's voice, translated into perfect English, whispered from the pendant. "Bridge builder Maya," he said, and she could hear the warmth in his tone despite the alien syllables underneath. "How are you adjusting to your return?" "It's hard," Maya admitted quietly. "Knowing what I know and not being able to share it. Seeing my world and understanding how much bigger everything really is. Such is the burden and privilege of those who stand between worlds," Elder Thalon replied. "But you are not alone in carrying it. We are here, watching, waiting for the right moment, and there are others among your people who are also preparing, whether they know it or not." "Others? Your species has always had bridge builders." "Maya, scientists who push the boundaries of knowledge, artists who help others see new possibilities, teachers who prepare young minds for wonders they cannot yet imagine. You are part of a tradition older than you realize." Maya looked up at the star-filled sky, no longer seeing distant lights but potential homes for friends she hadn't met yet. "What do I do now?" "You grow. You learn. You become the person your world will need when the time comes for open contact. And you remember that the greatest bridges are built not with grand gestures, but with small acts of understanding, courage, and kindness." Over the following weeks, Maya settled back into her normal life, but nothing felt quite the same. She threw herself into her studies with a passion that surprised her teachers. She volunteered at the local animal shelter, where her newfound ability to communicate with frightened creatures made her invaluable. She started a science club at school that focused on astrobiology and the possibility of life beyond Earth. And sometimes, late at night, she would use the communication device to talk with her friends among the stars. Kes was learning human languages and customs, preparing for the day when the two species would meet. Jara had fully recovered and was working with other Kethmari to develop protocols for eventual contact with Earth. Elder Thalon shared stories of other young civilizations the Kethmari had helped guide into the galactic community. "It takes time," he told Maya during one of their conversations. "Decades, sometimes centuries. But every species that joins us makes the galaxy richer, brings new perspectives and possibilities. Your people will contribute something unique when their time comes." "How will I know when that time is?" Maya asked. "You will know," Elder Thalon assured her. "The signs will be unmistakable, and when they appear you will be ready." Years passed. Maya excelled in school, earned a scholarship to study xenobiology and communications, and eventually became a respected scientist, working on projects that seemed purely theoretical, but were actually preparing humanity for a future most people couldn't imagine. She never forgot her promise to return to the stars, to be a bridge between two worlds, and the Kethmari never forgot their promise to her either. On her 30th birthday, as Maya stood in her laboratory looking at data from a radio telescope array that had just detected the first confirmed artificial signals from beyond the solar system, her pendant began to glow with the familiar warm light of incoming communication. "Bridge builder Maya," Elder Thalon's voice said, and she could hear the excitement even through the translation. "I believe it is time." Maya smiled as she looked at the data showing humanity's first concrete proof that they were not alone in the universe. The scared 12-year-old girl who had stumbled across a crashed alien ship was gone, replaced by a confident woman who had spent 18 years preparing for this moment. "Yes," she said, reaching for her phone to begin making the calls that would change human civilization forever. "I think it is." Above Earth, invisible to human eyes but watching with patient hope, Kes looked down at the blue world where their first human friend was about to help two species take their first steps toward each other. The young Kethmari, now grown into a skilled diplomat, whispered a human phrase they had learned long ago. "Welcome to the galaxy, Earth." The greatest bridge of all was finally about to be built.